So I have been enjoying all of Runeslinger's Star Trek Adventures 2D20, not only the sessions, but all of his reflections and all of his videos about the game system. And it is one of my favorite games. I've had a handful of experiences with 2D20 Star Trek Adventures, but I absolutely loved it, and I love the 2D20 system. I do believe it is far better system for the likes of Star Trek than Conan, but that's an opinion, and it's just an observation that I have about the style of Conan for me as a person, someone who sees it differently. But for Star Trek, I do believe 2D20 is ideal for a number of reasons. But what I want to talk about, I've been inspired by his observations about how the mechanics work and how to go about implementing these mechanics in such a way that there isn't conflict necessarily between the players as characters via these mechanical choices like rank. Okay, and so it's led me to say this also kind of folds into what we're asking of players in Dark Age of Man. So this is obviously, in a way, it is to put in my 2 cents and reflect upon those observations and put in my 2 cents. So first, I would start by saying what is it about role playing that you as a player have experienced that I think provides a space in which the players have certain expectations of their character in the session at the table. Okay, so what I mean by that is, well, we're all equal players at the table. One of these players has a different job description and has some, I wouldn't say control. They do have some control over that table, the GM, the referee, so to speak. Okay, they have an autonomy to the actual system that the players don't get. They think they get, and this is, I think, become one of the challenges for modern games with modern gamers, is as people have come to the table later with certain expectations of what it means to be a player at a table, they at that same time want the same level of input or control upon the table, and that's fine, right? But it's creating it depends on the game itself, right? So the first thing I say to players is, know the rules, read the rules, know the rules, and decide whether you want to be involved in this particular game. If for instance, it's no different choosing a role-playing game than it is picking a war game. Do you want the war game with all of the minutia and all of the subtle layers and complexity of moving individual units, or do you want something where one unit, one tile is an entire battalion? You have to decide what the game demands. I can't sit down to play a game in which it's individual soldier movement and then complain that there's no battalion. I want to move as a battalion, right? The game doesn't allow that. So first, always recognize role-playing games are first games, and they do have rules, and they do state how we're going to do this thing. So decide whether you want to be involved in that thing. Recognize that if you do, it's not going to be the same as Dungeons & Dragons. It's not going to be the same as Dungeons & Dragons first edition. It's not going to be the same as 5th edition. It's not going to be the same as 4th edition, right? You're going to have a different role as a player. Some tables really restrict what the player can do and what the player is about. Others say the player has tons of control. The player they're liberated. But this brings me about to the other part of this. You are an equal player at the table, but you are bound by the rules. I am a cleric. I can turn undead. Joe, you're a magic user. You cannot turn undead. So don't gripe when I'm the guy turning undead. All right. Now you can later complain that the GM's always putting undead in the game and he doesn't get to exercise his abilities. Well, okay. But again, that's a player complaining about their opportunity to shine or to have an impact upon the table in the session. And these are all valid things that we've all witnessed, seen, and hopefully not many of us have had to suffer in the long term. So first, know the game and recognize you're a player first. The game does not revolve around your character. And this is where I would have trouble with modern players in, say, D&D 5th edition. You are entitled to create your character a particular way. You are entitled to equip your character within the rules a particular way. You are entitled to present your character at the table with equal say. But the game does not revolve around your character. It does not revolve around Joe's character or Bill's character. It is a table of players using characters to interact with the world. And therefore, you aren't entitled to see your character as the game. Okay? So, the game has mechanics that direct the actuality of what is happening, not your character, right? So you cannot, your character is not the game. The game does not revolve around your character, despite your want to see so. And I think what has made this dilemma more difficult is video games, right? And this, I think many players have come to tabletop role-playing from video games, especially modern players. They are the center of the thing in video games. I am Geralt of Rivia. The whole damn game revolves around every decision I make, because if I go right, the game, I go right. I enact that thing. If I get on my horse and ride across the wasteland to this thing, I'm activating that thing. The game does nothing that I don't direct through my character being the center of the video game. This is true of Skyrim. I mean, name it. It's true of all video games, right? Nathan Drake does not climb to the top of the train unless I make Nathan Drake climb to the top of the train. So we have a problem where players come to the tabletop thinking, right, that this is like a role-playing video game. Their character directs traffic. Their character directs play. Their character is the game. So the chief difference between video games and tabletop role-playing games, video games quite literally revolve around you alone as a player. Now, even if you're playing in an MMO online game, you can do and direct and be. The rest of the world will go on about its business, right? And then you'll have those player versus player moments, etc., etc. Well, you're not entitled to that, I think, at a traditional role-playing table unless the game itself declares this is what we're doing. Okay. So with that said, now I'll transition to the next phase. So for instance, in 2D20 Star Trek, if the game says these things exist, there is a proper procedure to enact and to make decisions mechanically. The game directs it, right? Then we have to have a cultural play in which the players respect each other as players, but also defer to what the game itself says, right? I want to go first. But when we rolled the dice at the beginning of Monopoly, you rolled the lowest number, Jason. You don't get to go first. Bill rolled a 6. Game starts with Bill, and we go clockwise. You're going to go third, Jason. Tough shit. That's the rules, right? Too bad. The game mechanics decided legally, fairly, based on the game rules, that Joe rolled a 6. The game starts with Joe. We go clockwise. Whatever. I haven't played Monopoly in 10 years, so I don't know. But you get my point. The game mechanics, right, must be adhered to by all the players, including the dungeon master or the GM or the referee, right? Now, the referee has other options and job description, but still, there is a game that they must adhere to. Okay. So, for instance, in Dark Age of Man, we are saying to the players, the world doesn't revolve around your character, but the world doesn't revolve unless you act as a character. Okay, so in Dark Age of Man, we are saying to the player, the agency is yours. If you do not move through space, the world doesn't function, right? If you do not narrate what it is you're trying to affect upon the world, or what you're doing, or declaring as an action, the world will not organically grow from that space, right? And we can have multiple players in multiple paths. We can have a Star Wars type session where Joe and Bill are on horses in London and Skip is in Dredgewater dealing with the monk. We can literally have split parties. The game is designed to mathematically not doom characters to a violent end because they don't have the math to defeat the evil monster. Players can pursue their conflict that they need to resolve or want to resolve, and the world literally does. The game does activate around their character and their character's decisions. So when I say to people that they come to Dark Age of Man and they think, oh, I get it, I get a little more clout. No. We are trying to change the table space. We are trying to actually say structurally, this won't the world won't evolve or revolve until your character says, does, takes action. And the mechanics derive literally from your declaration of actions. Okay. Now that's still true, I think, in Star Trek 2D20. Whether the captain says, what is the planet? Scipio, and Scipio says, the GM says you need to make a momentum check observation of the planet using your computer skill here, and we roll the dice, and he extracts information. The GM gives it to him, which is given therefore to the captain, and we have a role play, an IC communication. However effectively the table chooses to communicate that, is the culture of the table. But he activates it by declaring we need to know, or the player activates it by saying, Captain's going to want to know what planet this is. Can I go ahead and make the scan now? Because it's my job. I have initiative. So I'm sitting at the console. I'm going to scan the planet before the captain says, what are we looking at here? Because I don't want my captain going, gee, Merry Christmas, on your quarter marks. When I sit down to judge your job efficiency, I'm going to tell them you're not. So sometimes the players would act, but they withhold that information until the captain asks for it, etc., etc. So every game has a game. Every game has mechanics that make the game, and the game is the actuality of the events, how the game processes, how the dice land, etc., etc. That becomes the actuality of the events that are occurring. Your character, you are free to be your character. You are free to feel your way. You're free to have your observations. You're free to exist in your vacuum of hurt feelings. I mean, as a character, I don't mean as a player, but as a character, because the captain has barked at you that you're not efficient enough. Whatever the case may be, so be it. But the game doesn't revolve around your character. The character is not the game. And if D&D, for instance, modern Dungeons and Dragons, is trying to bring it to a level of equality, which I do believe they're trying to do, they need to change the mechanism of how the game is activated. They need to get away from the traditional dungeon master player role. And they haven't yet figured this out at Wizards of the Coast. If they want to change Dungeons and Dragons, they need to just change Dungeons and Dragons. They are creating a different kind of dilemma by presenting the exact same mechanical device to the players, but the players have a different expectations of how they want the games to function. Maybe not all the D&D players, but I think many are. The conflict is between trying to satisfy a particular group of player with a game that mechanically doesn't support that kind of player, if that's what I'm getting at. Okay, so it depends, right? Because obviously there are millions of people playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition exactly the way they want to play it, and those rules support exactly what they're trying to do. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not working. I'm saying there are certain players coming to that game who want a certain kind of impact upon the game, and the game mechanics don't support that, right? Okay, that's what I'm getting at. So if you don't like Monopoly, play Risk. If you don't like Risk, play Monopoly. But recognize Risk has rules, and the game does not revolve around you as a player, right? And most people understand that when they come to a game to play a competitive game. Role-playing is you're always told, this is not a competitive game. There are no winners and losers. Yeah, but let's not confuse gaming with winning and losing. Gaming means there's an element of chance and unpredictability that you cannot control as the player. It doesn't have to be about the winning or losing. So yes, role-playing is a game, and the devices and the mechanics, they're going to tell us the actuality of the results, whether your player or your character likes it or not, right? So I was inspired by these videos. It's made me think a lot about my past experiences learning how to be a player when I had been a GM for 30 years, and recognizing I went through some of the frustrations of, wait a second, how much of this is within my power, how much of this is within my agency, how much of this is being ignored by the GM, and confusing the game itself with the limiting factors of the GM, or the limiting factors of how the game respects my character sheet, right? And until you get enough experience, you can back away and actually analyze, why was I frustrated? Maybe the GM isn't at fault. The game mechanics didn't support that call, right? They didn't support me wanting to be that thing, right? They didn't support me declaring that action. And so it takes a level of reflection to say, whoa, is that a game I like to play? If it is, I need to learn the rules, I need to understand the procedures, and I need to recognize my character's role at the table, not the player's role. We're all equal players, we're all players, but the game still has rules, still has elements that direct the actuality of outcomes, right? It's not just what I want because this game should revolve around my character. There are games where you're free to be IC, you're free to be your character, and it just doesn't matter, right? It's ultimately a shallow experience, and then we just roll dice to fight goblins. Then there are those games that demand the character literally set the scene, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I think this is fascinating because I love the experience of 2D20. I love Peace. See, Peace is a game with these functions. And I found that I am utterly an IC, even if we're looking at the mechanical functions, even when we're making dice rolls, even when there is a conversation of the mechanics, I don't lose IC. That to me is a complementary system. It's a system in which the mechanics are there. There's layers of them, but they do complement the state of mind I'm in as Sarah in the Peace sessions. That can be a testament to my focus. It could be a testimonial to the quality of the mechanics and how they work in the game. It could be a testimony to how Robert is, with his pace, is delivering the game as a GM. All of those things could be codependent, right? They could all be interdependent on each other, and it just worked out, right? Somebody else could play Peace with a different GM and get a totally different experience that did not work for them at all. So much of it is the people we play with, not just the games we choose to play, but the people we choose to play with. I can argue that if people have an issue with rank in Star Trek because they think it's going to have, other players are going to have a power over their character, I would argue this has been happening for 40 years in Dungeons and Dragons when the high-level thief is stealing from a party member, when a bard casts curse upon a party member, when one of the players in the party actually tries to put to sleep one of his party members or tries to cast a spell upon one of his party members. The idea that this kind of stuff has not happened at tables in Dungeons and Dragons for eons is crazy, right? And there are rules to support the player pickpocketing his partner at the table. He can literally use the mechanics to do such a thing. They have to change the rules. They have to house brew, and the GM has to say, "I won't tolerate player versus player at the table." That would ultimately be building a house rule, a homebrew, right? So this idea that somehow because Star Trek introduces rank as part of the social order and structure, and in our game, for instance, we use prestige. A peasant is not going to give orders to another player, but the nobleman, they must defer to the nobleman. So if now that doesn't mean Eric as Ulfgar, a 0 prestige, actually I think he's a one prestige blacksmith, is utterly a slave to another player at a level 3. No, but there is a level of deference that will occur, and if he doesn't, and he can deny it, he becomes an outlaw. He becomes a person that would be ultimately an outlaw and a villain, and they did exist, and they could exist between players. They could exist in the world. But in the order of the game system, the king, you're gonna ultimately defer to the king. You can be obstinate, you can be petulant, and it can cost you. You can even be executed for a certain level of hostility against the higher classes. This would be true in Star Trek, right? It is still a game, and those rules must apply, so we have the effect of that game. If you don't want those elements, play something else, right? It's that simple. So, all right, thank you. Good day.